Everybody knows what time it is. Apart from the time when I stream, of course. Everybody knows rather what I will likely be talking about today for the bulk of this stream. Is what I meant by that. Let's boot up the retro rewind. Okay, let me check for updates here. Downloading finished. Okay. All right. Rebooting. Why is my chair so far to the left on this mat? Insert joke about me being far left or something. Haha, of course. Anywho. Do I have this tab pulled up? Yes, I do. Okay, good. I do have this thing open. Okay. Right. Since this is a developing situation, it looks like I'm going to be going to Al Jazeera pretty frequently for this. I find that Al Jazeera's live coverage is consistently on top of things, and even if it's biased, it tends to instead of like trying to equivocate, sometimes it will more transparently lean one way or the other, which means it's better to read from my perspective. Also, I may have, with respect to the title, I may or may not have titled the stream to potentially bait some Indian Twitch users to come in and be like really Hitlerite in my Twitch chat about India airstriking Pakistan and tensions escalating in the region, because I thought it'd be funny. Take that however you will as to an indication of my character, but you know. Look, I'm being a little bit more content pilled, is what's up there. But regardless, I don't want to bury the lead or insinuate that the situation is less serious than it is. I want to give a quick rundown for what has happened to lead us to this point, and generally the point that we're at right now. So this is tensions have been escalating in the region of Kashmir, which is a disputed territory, nominally like independent or autonomous or something. What's with so many Indians simping for Hitler anyway? I could explain that in a minute, but yes, it is very weird. Kashmir is disputed between India, Pakistan, and China. And India and Pakistan particularly have been very actively fighting over it ever since the British left. In fact, the reason that it was so disputed is because the British like straightforwardly drew lines in such a way to get countries in the region to fight with each other over this unclearly marked territory. What happened recently is that obviously there have been terror attacks in the region that kind of comes with political instability in an international context. And India used one of these terror attacks as a pretext. Admittedly, not the worst pretext I've ever seen, although it was still pretty bad. There was like a terror attack on some tourists. Why the region was even open to tourists, I will never know. But I can speculate that it was maybe to provide such a pretext. I believe it was some Pakistan like state-sponsored terror group, of which I'm sure there are many, just as I'm sure there are many Indian state-sponsored terror groups, that did a terrorist attack, ended up killing a couple of Indian civilians. That was the thing that they named in their cause for war. And as a result, India struck Pakistan, not Pakistan-controlled Kashmir, but Pakistan. They conducted airstrikes and launched missiles into Pakistani territory, not disputed Kashmir territory. Pakistan sovereign soil, not disputed by anybody. Which is a very, very alarming sort of move from India, but it makes sense from their government's perspective and from Modi's perspective. The real reason that India did this is because Modi is a fucking psychopath, and he's like Indian Hitler, as are many Indians, of course, which is a phenomenon unto itself. But Modi, particularly being Mr. Indian Hitler, far-right authoritarian, has been losing the grace of the people. He's been losing popularity over time, and every fascist needs a good crisis to sort of keep those popularity numbers up, to stay in power for longer, to keep their party in power for longer, and to do whatever kind of agenda they have. So basically, that was the reason that India escalated tensions here, right? For their part, it seems like Pakistan has actually yet to respond. As of me speaking right now, we're still awaiting a response, like a military response of any kind from Pakistan. I haven't seen much developing there yet. So with respect to the government, that's why they're doing this. Is to manufacture a good war, a good, a nice crisis to whip up popular fervor, to put people in irrational enough of a state that they will continue to support the strongman authoritarian when he would otherwise be, losing his power base in a way. However, as for the average Indian, the Indian propaganda bubble is actually insane. Shocker, the Marxist is going to come back to the angle of manufacturing consent being the reason why, Indians are also insane and Hitlerite online. If you've ever read or seen Indian news, which I actually have, I did a... briefly, in early 2024, I worked as an intern for actually an Indian media company. I don't know if you guys knew that. And, the propaganda bubble is really something else. It is really something. The Indian news media is so propagandistic, it actually makes American media look competent by comparison. American media comes with its own problems, but Indian media is blatantly, so blatantly narrativized and, state TV bullshit. It is actually way more entertaining, but it's way more toxic propaganda. Not to make this big event about America, but it almost single-handedly dispels the dipshit notion that the international community is so scared of Trump they don't dare act aggressively against each other. Yeah, that it does dispel that narrative. And in fact, again, to keep making this about America, of course, because we're Americans, it sort of shows the dereliction of responsibility that comes with the global hegemon and the decay of the United States and its international position being closely intertwined with the decay of the international order. Because the United States is no longer a capable negotiator or a competent, basically no longer a competent steward of global stability in any form in its seat of being the global hegemon, global stability as a whole has started to decay a lot. We're so up our ass about supporting Israel as of late, the government, that America hasn't been paying that much attention to a whole lot else. That's one of the... there's a lot of factors that go into it. But yeah, this is one of the many consequences of a decaying international order and sort of a regression away from internationalism, which is currently being spearheaded by the United States, alienating our allies and sort of creating a very dangerous power vacuum where there would otherwise be a very large country that's capable of acting as a multi-purpose diplomat for various other countries, that's kind of America's role in all this, is that we are our sort of absenteeism from global politics in a sense that like we're not contributing positively anymore has made this a lot worse, or has enabled this to get worse. Okay, that was a very wacky usage of that Mega Mushroom. Yeah, so that's why tensions have been able to escalate, why they have. You know, Modi, it was kind of like a perfect storm of circumstances. Modi is really bloodthirsty. He's got the propaganda network to make Indians really bloodthirsty, because Indians really, really hate Pakistan, because, you know, they fucking hate Muslims. You know, and the propaganda bubble constantly reinforces that. You know, it's the same sort of factors that makes it so that, like, whenever you see Indian nationalists doing their thing online, they're all like supporting Israel and being like, India also lion, or something like that, you know. And comparatively, you don't see that many Pakistani nationalists online, although I suspect that's probably just because Pakistan doesn't quite have the infrastructure to support that many people being able to go on the internet. Pakistan is not as materially developed as India, from what I understand. You know, but they're both very big countries with that are very focused on their military as well. You know, India very jingoistic and nationalistic, and Pakistan is literally a military junta. So, you know, they're both going to have their militaries doing their thing. So, the long and the short of it, India fucking hates Pakistan. Pakistan fucking hates India. They're both fighting over Kashmir. China is there and they exist. Good job, President Xi. Thank you. And as a result of various things, mostly having to do with Modi's declining popularity, India decided to conduct an airstrike not just into Kashmir, but into Pakistan proper. And now, you know, tensions are as high as they've ever been, and we're sort of awaiting a military response from Pakistan to see if they will do a larger response. In fact, I think I saw yesterday that Pakistan launched a strike into Indian-held Kashmir, but I think that's actually like that's kind of less of a response than I expected from this. And in fact, that makes it kind of clear that this is a very this is more of a one-sided attempt to make a proper war out of this. It seems like Pakistan doesn't want war over this as badly as India does, you know. And certainly while India is behaving very recklessly, it sort of spurs all everybody's fears, at least in some measure or another, that this could spiral into a nuclear conflict. But that's also something that I wanted to address and sort of dispel, actually, is that the whole reason that this war is happening, or that this conflict is happening, I don't even think there's been an official declaration of war yet. I'll have to stay on top of that, but, you know, the reason this conflict is happening, Kashmir itself is not a particularly, like, special piece of land insofar as, like, resources, trade routes. Sure, it has strategic value and positioning and stuff like that. But the reason that India, Pakistan, and China as well are really fighting over it is because of geopolitical importance, positioning, jockeying, and hegemony. You know, if somebody can control... Also, I'm racing like shit. If somebody controls Kashmir, which is a disputed territory between three very big countries, they can have a claim to controlling the region, basically. You know, if they're able to sort of assert their control over Kashmir where the other two nations couldn't, then they will have the best claim to being sort of the big dog in the area, right? China, I don't know if they are as interested in that as they are in trade routes in the South China Sea and you know, basically like having influence over the Strait of Malacca and Taiwan and like Hong Kong, Macau, that sort of thing. But India and Pakistan are both very interested in muscling the other one out to be the next big dog in the Indian subcontinent, and certainly in broader South Asia or even Southeast Asia, you know, if they extend their influence there. This is a matter of geopolitical jockeying. All that to say, to bring it back to the potential nuclear threat, I don't think that they will launch nukes over this. In fact, even in the really, really insane Hitlerite Indian like propaganda bubble, I did see anchors sort of downplaying the likelihood of a nuclear strike from either country, which means as jingoistic as they are interested in this to the end of geopolitical power in the region for their country, right? So they have, it seems that both countries have an interest not to press the big red button that says nuke the world, right? Like, what good is geopolitical control if the population is cut in half and like life is now a million times worse, and like you kind of squandered everything that you were trying to gain some sort of influence over. You know, it's just like, as sophomoric as it may seem, it's just the whole like folly of being a king without a kingdom sort of shtick. Even in wars like this, I think there's a pretty strong barrier to using nukes. In a similar way to how, like, with Russia and Ukraine, that was like a situation where Russia constantly threatened nuclear warfare, but they've never actually pressed the button. They've never actually used even so much as tactical nukes. Because they know that would be the end of the world, and the whole reason they started the war is because they want, like, geopolitical hegemony, and they kind of need the world to be around and more or less intact for them to achieve that objective, right? You know, so there's like a bottom, there's a absolute bottom of the barrel bottom line that will sort of like geopolitical rationality that I think is going to be a pretty effective barrier against nuclear war here, which is good. But, you know, again, the bar isn't high because there are airstrikes happening, and it seems like this is a symptom of the decay of the international, you know, the rules-based order, for whatever that's worth. But it just means that, like, countries are now more willing to make war with each other because of emerging power vacuums, which is, you know, which is not good. After this race, I can actually take a look at Al Jazeera to see if there have been any developments in the past couple minutes, past couple of hours, or something like that. You know? Of course, the military-industrial complex in both these countries is going to be eaten real good. You know, seen a lot of people be really nationalistic online about this. Mostly Indians for the reason I outlined earlier. I also saw Pakistani politicians say that, like, the what was it, the whichever terror group it was that did the, like, immediately preceding attack were like freedom fighters, which is really funny because that's like the last thing you want to say in that situation if you're a high profile individual. But I think those people have got to understand there's nothing in this for them. I know that, like, I'm not going to get through to any of these people, but, like, if I can breach any fence sitters or anybody who just isn't familiar at all with the issue, we're entering a multipolar era. It's almost all America's doing. Yes, Fukuyama stays winning, unfortunately, where he said that America will have it all, and then out of sheer boredom, it'll throw it all away. Kind of what we're looking at right now. And one of the things that America is throwing away is global stability. That's kind of what happens when in a unipolar world, politically speaking, is you have that sort of stability. The nothing ever happens attitude is only possible in a unipolar world where there's one country pretty ubiquitously on top. But we have manufactured a multipolar world, so now we are no longer in the territory of nothing ever happens, which means, like, wars are going to break out, which is not good. but like, you know, a lot of the, I'm not under the illusion that any of these, like any given nationalist, like Indian nationalist online or Pakistani nationalist, again, to the extent that they're online, is like a very wealthy business person or a general or somebody that like stands to directly materially benefit from the engagements of the military, right? Like there's nothing in this for them, right? This is all like the sort of plague of political irrationality and nationalism being pulled over people's eyes to distract them from things that are actually wrong in their lives. You know, like, oh yeah, great, you know, invade Pakistan. I'm sure that's going to solve the like problems that are occurring in very underdeveloped parts of India where there's a lot of infectious disease running rampant, or you know, medical deserts, food deserts, and whatever, and like the lack of protection for laborers. You know, I'm sure all of that's going to be addressed by you like going to war in Pakistan. Like, no, no. If only we had Kashmir, I will be able to make rent this month or something. I don't know how bad rents are in India, if they're that bad. You know, this is like this is Modi jangling shiny keys, like shiny objects in front of people's eyes, but the shiny objects is like killing thousands of people. You know. No, I fucked up that shortcut. But outside of that, I don't know how much there is to say about the conflict because it's very early. I do think it is possible that this branches into a conventional ground war, which would be really bad. And the reason for that is because Modi is pretty damn bloodthirsty, and he really wants to stay in power. Modi has been sort of escalating, trying to like gin up more of an excuse to make this into a war, whereas Pakistan, it seems like, is more they just kind of want an out. They kind of want an off ramp so that this can like not become a full-blown war, because it would be devastating for both India and Pakistan. Let's check out Al Jazeera. Yeah, look at this. Pakistan trying to avoid full-fledged war. Khawaja Asif calls the Indian assault an invitation to expand the conflict. Asif told CNN that his country is trying to avoid an all-out war with India, but must be prepared for one. We cannot be caught with our guards down. So it seems they're like Pakistan. It seems, again, Al Jazeera kind of has a bias towards Pakistan, but it seems like they're like cautiously approaching it with like, yeah, we don't really want a war here. Prominent Indian spiritual guru backs attack on Pakistan. That's not entirely surprising. Yeah, so it seems like the demand for war is coming mostly out of India. And I'm sure that there are people in Pakistan who want a war as well. Like, it's a nation state. Of course that's going to happen. It's a military junta, for shit's sake, you know? But it seems like the government of Pakistan is much less in alignment on that issue. They're more like, I don't know if we want this. You know, some of us maybe, but not all of us. You know, I don't know. And that could. I'm not sure what that could produce, right? Because if the conflict were to escalate between these two countries, it would be a war. It wouldn't be like the slaughter in Gaza, where Palestine is not really a state. You know, Palestine doesn't have a state or the infrastructure of a state, so they don't have a military. They don't have a great means of fighting a war. Pakistan does have a military. You know, India and Pakistan both have regular militaries with command structures, officers, etc., etc. And that would be Well, it'd be really bad considering the size of both countries. Consider that Pakistan alone has more people living in it than both Russia and Ukraine combined at the outset of the war in Ukraine, right? That's a lot of people, and that's just Pakistan, and India has about 5 to 6 times as many people. Very densely populated countries. And I'm not entirely sure how much else I'm going to talk about aside from this developing situation, because it's like it's been dominating the news cycle, and it seems like this is a basically unprecedented event. Because as much as I said that it's unlikely that nuclear war will happen here, this is still escalating military action on the part of a nuclear power against another nuclear power. Pakistan and India both have nuclear arsenals. You know? $1550 GMT. But yeah, and I also know that there's a lot of people who, regardless of their opinions, one way or the other, on whether they like support India or Pakistan, they sort of view it in that way, where it's like, do you think one nation is like more or less evil than the other one? I mean, like, apart from the what seems to be the fact of the matter that India took more of an escalatory action recently than Pakistan did, they're both like horrid, like stinky authoritarian nation states, right? Like there's no good guy in this situation, you know? There's just a country that's going more Joker mode than the country next to them, you know? No! I used that mushroom at exactly the wrong time. Man. That sucks. Sure, fuck it. Just use this bullet bill. Made a catastrophic mistake, went from 2nd to 6th, pulled a bullet, got 2nd anyway. Classic Mario Kart moment. Man. You know what's interesting, actually? Somebody pointed this out yesterday. This war, well, again, I hesitate to call it a war, I guess, because the war hasn't really been declared yet. It seems to be unfolding more or less along the logical lines of World War One. The incident that started World War One, I and most other people probably learned in schools that, there was this assassin from Serbia named Gavrilo Princip, and he shot Archduke Franz Ferdinand, and Austria, used that as a cause to war and invaded Serbia. And that dragged in a bunch of different allied nations to both Austria and Serbia. They all, if we're playing EU4 or whatever, they all check the fucking co-belligerent box on all of their allies. So all the allies called in all the other allies, and then, it became a world war where, many, many countries were at war with each other. Right now, it doesn't seem like they're going to, check all the co-belligerent boxes of all of their allies. But the logic of, oh, this attack was carried out by, I don't know, Pakistani nationals? People from Pakistan were part of this terror cell which, although it was supported by the state of Pakistan, is still a non-state organization, not part of like the military command structure. You know, they did this attack. Therefore, we are justified in invading Pakistan, a country with proper like borders and like representatives at the UN and shit. You know? Hello, Gotron. Welcome back. Basically, like, you have 69 Pakistani governmental principes, and they acted like basically independent of the state of Pakistan, even though they were receiving financial and military support from them. You know, they were getting aid and whatever. And India was like, that's it. Because John Pakistan committed this attack, you know, Muhammad Pakistan, many such cases, we will now go to war with your entire country. I'm sleeping when a notification popped up. Ah. And that's a dangerous, that World War I-esque logic there is very dangerous. Because again, it led to World War I. You know, it'd be like, imagine if like, to put it in more familiar terms for that, countries making excuse to kill people, where have I heard that before? Yeah, true, you know, damn, that's crazy. You're telling me nation states love to drum up jingoistic sentiment and go to war so that their governments can remain in power. That's crazy. Nobody knew this before. That's crazy. You know, it would be like if I mean, I'm making a parody here, but this is legitimately what MAGA believes. One guy who's a Mexican citizen commits a crime in America. Let's say, like, I don't know, some attack happens from like a cartel or something like that, and there's a Mexican citizen or maybe even several Mexican citizens that do this attack, right? Cartels are very big organizations. They have ties with the government, whatever. They have ties with a bunch of businesses too. Let's say like Juan Mexico does like a drive-by on behalf of like a cartel or something. And then the United States is like, that's it. We have evidence to believe that a Mexican man is responsible for this. Therefore, we will now invade the country of Mexico with our military. Like, what the fuck? And again, this is me constructing like an analogous argument so people could understand kind of what that would look like from America's perspective, or from a different country's perspective, if something were to happen sort of along those lines. But like, it's kind of hard for me to construct that as a parodical scenario, because that's literally what MAGA believes. You know, one of the people who have been around on my channel for a long time will know that I covered the Republican presidential debates. And, like, legitimately, one of the talking points that MAGA and the Republicans are now using is, we should invade Mexico. Why? They can't really articulate a reason, because there isn't really a reason. Their brains were designed to be pawns from propaganda. Yeah, and I was saying earlier, like, the Indian propaganda bubble is really bad. That's so true. It would be like if Saudi Arabians destroyed the World Trade Center and then we invaded Iraq to get back at them. Wait a minute. Hold up. Yeah, it's a similar kind of logic. Now, I may have put up with it if we decided to invade Saudi Arabia instead. Maybe. Be acceptable propaganda, but at least I'm a lot better than median voters. Yeah, probably as long as you're clearing that bar, I think that's good. Love to destroy Saudi Arabia. I'm such a neocon when it comes to them, Russia. That's true. Big facts. I'm a you know, certified hippie, peace-loving Western leftist until somebody mentions Russia or Saudi Arabia, and then I become a fucking schizo neocon and like fucking burn it all down. People expect me to say, "Oh, I'm immune to propaganda." Yeah, I mean, nobody's really immune to propaganda, right? Like, this live stream is propaganda, you know? I have political opinions, and part of the reason that I do this live stream is to articulate and argue in favor of my political opinions. That's what propaganda is. Like, it has a preference or viewpoint for how they see the world. The difference is, my live stream is propaganda in parentheses based, whereas, you know, Indian media and American media and all that, like, jingoistic nation-state shit is propaganda in parentheses cringe. You know, there's a bit of significant difference, you see. You know, that makes me cooler than them. That was a good race. What? Third? How'd that happen? Dang. Anything? Anything from Al Jazeera? 13 hours ago, Pakistan PM Sharif says India will suffer the consequences in address to nation. That seems actually like kind of mild language comparatively. Let's see, what did the Pakistan Prime Minister say here? Like, what exactly? Sharif addressed the Pakistani people in a televised speech shortly after he attended the funeral of 7-year-old Irtaza Abbas, who was killed in the Indian attack. We resolve that we will avenge the blood of our innocent martyrs, Sharif said. Last night we showed that Pakistan can deliver jaw-breaking response for its defense. At the line of control, the dogfight raged for about an hour. Pakistani pilots remained in their airspace. The enemy's planes were shattered to pieces. In conventional warfare last night, we proved that Pakistan prevailed. Sharif also emphasized Pakistan's position on Kashmir. As per international law, Jammu and Kashmir is a disputed territory and will remain until a plebiscite is done, the Prime Minister said, regardless of how many unilateral decisions India takes, it cannot change the reality. So that's, I mean, clearly some of that is jingoistic drum beating, right? Like, oh yeah, we're better than India, haha. Fucking get owned in the marketplace of ideas, by which I mean the marketplace of guns and bullets. Also, barbarian such and such, they killed civilians, which I mean, they did, but both of those countries do that. But it seems like it seems like Pakistan is taking, like, no, look, we're just going to go with basically, like, the regular UN line on this? That's what it seems like. I mean, they said, like, look, this is a disputed territory, which we have, like, spurious control over between the three, like, countries that dispute it. And it will remain that way until there's a plebiscite. Which sounds reasonable, I guess. I don't know. Again, I think it goes to... Yeah, name a country that hasn't killed people. You know, challenge level impossible. It really does. It seems like that goes to support my argument earlier that, like, the Indian government really wants this war, and Pakistan, like, kind of doesn't. They're like, dog, can we just do the plebiscite, please? You know? But they're not helping their case here. I gotta say, Pakistan isn't really helping their case here by also doing the whole, like, but also, by the way, we're, like, better than you on the battlefield and stuff, and your troops suck, and we beat you in conventional warfare. Ow. That's the kind of shit that nationalism does to your brain. You can't just say, bro, can we, like, chill the fuck out, please? You have to also be like, we're also better than you and, like, suck my balls. But can we chill out, please? Certified India-Pakistan relations moment. Erdogan conveys Turkey's solidarity to Pakistan. Turkey and China seems like they're both leaning in to support Pakistan, while I actually don't know who all it would be indicating that they like support Israel. Average person looking at me like, why do you not have a big ego? It's important to have some ego, but yeah. Some people have like a really dumb ego. Like, they're not proud of shit that they can do or like skills that they have. They're proud of the fucking flag that they wave, which is cringe as fuck. And I mean, obviously, to cringe is to live, right? But like, yeah, it's like it's like what's the term? I think there's a term for it where it's like ego, but also not pride. Pride describes like the same thing as ego. It's like the kind of thing where nobody wants to back down to avoid getting in a fight. I guess it is just like people get an ego over the stupidest shit, you know? Like, yeah, well, I can beat you up. Like, who the fuck cares? Why are we talking about who can beat up who? Right? Like, I don't know, dude. Watch me try to front run this track. It's gonna go horribly wrong, but I'm gonna do it anyway. It's gonna have a mushroom or something, probably. Yep. Makes sense. Well, look, the important thing is that I didn't get redded. I would watch that, weirdly enough. Yeah. I probably would, too. It's a good bit, I think. Talked about the Vampire Music movie. I don't think I've seen that movie. Erdogan told Sharif that Turkey supported what he called Pakistan's calm and restrained policies, as he says, in the crisis, according to his office in a statement. Apparently it's popular. Oh, okay. India. Oh, here we go. Here's something. 17 seconds ago from Al Jazeera, new development. India's National Investigation Agency has called on people with information or photographs related to the Pahalgam attack that killed 26 people in Indian administered Kashmir last month to contact law enforcement. The NIA, quote, has now decided to scale up its efforts even more intensely to ensure that no useful information or evidence is missed out in its investigation into the horrendous crime against humanity. India has alleged links between the attackers and Pakistan, claims that Islamabad has vehemently denied. Obviously, we don't trust Pakistan in that case because, you know, damn, that's crazy. States support terror groups, and state-supported terror groups do things that are supported by, if not done by, the state. That's crazy. Unfortunately, like, initially I saw that development, and I thought, like, oh shit, is India gonna be like, let's do like a neutral investigation fact-finding mission to like assess the damage and, like, I don't know, like calm things down a little bit, buy some time for tensions to cool off. But no, it seems like the purpose of this investigation being headed by an Indian intelligence or investigation agency is meant to, you know, further beat the drums of war here. Yes, I did the fucking insane low tricks, kind of. Some people act like gorilla. That's true. People love beating their chest over this shit, dude. I don't know. It's probably like, well, there's a sense of, like, there's a sense of togetherness that gets struck, but also, like, there's a it's like heavily encouraged by all the propaganda like media outlets because it's like it's a very convenient sort of sentiment that doesn't challenge power in a meaningful way. In fact, it reaffirms power. It reaffirms the power of the state and the nation. I fucked up that ending bit. Yeah, if you look them in the eyes, they're like, all right, that's it. I have to kill you now. That's true. Yeah. Okay, I was going to say this about Erdogan's statements about, like, Turkey offering solidarity to Pakistan. How funny would it be if in this geopolitical jockeying scenario where India and Pakistan are, like, trying to wrestle each other out of the region to gain control over Kashmir, how funny would it be if India makes this move to militarily muscle out Pakistan, which then galvanizes a significant portion of the world to be sympathetic to Pakistan, and then India, like, loses the propaganda war for itself by just constantly posting basically the equivalent of those memes you see about Indian guys online. As funny as it is, you know, they post through it being like, India also lion, we will destroy stupid, stinky Pakistan, or something like that. And then, like, over time, the international community starts to, like, side more with Pakistan, and India, like, starts becoming more isolated. That's kind of like what happened with Israel, where Israel, like, lost the propaganda war for itself because it's high on its own supply, which I do see as a possibility for India. I don't think they're going to win this propaganda war. Yeah. Yeah, okay. I want to make a prediction because I think it'd be funny. Okay. I'm liable to be wrong here. Understand that I might be wrong, but there's a lens of analysis that I think I'm more or less consistently applying here. I think it's possible that a somewhat comparable thing to Israel and Gaza happens here, where India initiates strikes and initiates a full-scale, like, war effort and starts churning that propaganda machine into overtime. But in so doing, because they're high on their own supply, they lose the propaganda war for themselves and isolate themselves from most of the international community, with the exception of maybe the United States. Maybe. I don't know how that's exactly going to play out. And then Pakistan, through, like, not being as insane, paradoxically being less stable and less developed, not having the infrastructure to churn a massive propaganda machine into overtime and be, like, that insane on the international stage, Pakistan might get more sympathy from the international community, which might make this whole thing backfire on India, where they sort of lose some global standing, at least insofar as connections, right? Like, they're still obviously a very relevant and important country, both in the region and in the world. But, like, they're not making any friends by doing this. And in the 21st century, geopolitical power is measured in terms of soft power, right? Which nations are you allied with? You know, what kind of business transactions and deals are you capable of making? What kind of trade relationships are you capable of massaging to your benefit, you know? Like, America, to put it another way, America, who was the global hegemon until quite recently, in some ways still is, was not the global hegemon because we had the biggest and most powerful military on Earth. That helped, but that wasn't why. You know, we never really used that military to just constantly enforce that shit. We were the global hegemon because we were the wealthiest country in the history of the world. We had allies, trade partners, military alliances, and economic blocks and whatever that we were a central part of. We basically dictated the flow of global trade to an extent. And because we had so many connections, we were able to massage those relationships in a way that benefited us, as in the United States. And I think what India is doing is kind of throwing away that soft power and that potential for soft power here, it's unintentionally probably giving that to Pakistan through through military engagement now, India is saying like, hey everybody, I'm going Joker mode and can't be trusted. And you know, that's what the world is going to probably take from that. And I think that Pakistan is going to look more reasonable by comparison. I have to stress, by comparison. So people will probably gravitate more towards Pakistan, as Turkey seems to be doing, as I think China did yesterday or the day before. You know? And that's going to result in, like, Pakistan, like, gaining some more in terms of, like, geopolitical relationships. Does that make sense? Basically, it's like the funny timeline where Tom is trying to shoot Jerry and he sticks the shotgun into the mouse hole, but then the tip of the shotgun comes out the fucking other, like, hole in the wall and he shoots himself in the face. You know, like, sure, you've got a shotgun. You know, you, Tom, the nation of India, you have a shotgun. You have more resources. You have more military force to levy against Pakistan. But in signaling, in using that force, you're signaling, yeah, we're willing to just bulldoze over another country militarily to get what we want. And that's not typically something that other countries in the international setting are eager to cozy up to, if that makes sense. You know? Like, nobody likes Israel because Israel's fucking unhinged. They use their military almost exclusively for fucking mulching civilians, mostly children, in the Gaza Strip. And sure, they have, like, military backers, but that's just because they're, like, a convenient outlet for the military-industrial complex. No nation really likes Israel or is particularly comfortable with sustained relationships with Israel, right? Because of how insane they are. Just when they don't know what to do, let's start a war. Yeah, true. It's the classic fascist playbook. Like I said at the beginning of this, Modi is the you know, the Prime Minister of India, and I think his party is the BJP, and they've been losing popularity. Both him and his party have been losing popularity over time, as sort of I guess more mismanagement comes to the fore in their attempts to develop India. Because the far right is never usually a competent bunch of people. And Modi and the BJP need a way to shore up their popularity, especially because Modi himself has been, like, under investigation for some shit. Similar enough to Netanyahu, actually. And so what's a convenient way to shore up your popularity? Manufacture a crisis, go to war. And that's what this is. You know? So it may buy him some time domestically, but I don't think it's going to be doing much for him internationally. You know? Ow. Oh. It's like Israel's true definition of forever war. Yeah, and that's kind of the purpose of Israel. They were created to be basically an outpost for the American military-industrial complex in the Middle East. That's exactly what they are. And, you know, they are acting accordingly. You know, the military-industrial complex just wants, you know, opportunities to train up their troops and test some new toys and, like, equipment and stuff. And Israel provides a very good opportunity in order to do that. It's the same reason that America has actually gravitated back towards supporting Ukraine. Because, like, while I support Ukraine, you know, contrary to Russia invading them, in the case of, like, the military-industrial complex and defense contractors, whatever, they are in favor of whatever keeps people fighting for longer, right? If Ukraine just surrendered, the fighting stops pretty instantly, right? But if they don't surrender, if they keep fighting, then they keep fighting. That's more opportunity for them to train soldiers in the region, to test their new equipment, to basically keep the money flowing into them. You know? It's just coincidentally, in the case of Ukraine, Ukraine's also being invaded by a very large militaristic fascist neighbor, which is bad. But yeah, in Israel's case, they don't have the whole like being invaded by a neighbor. They're just invading their neighbor. Uh, uh, and I imagine with India, that might not be the main driving force. I don't know how embedded the military-industrial complex of India is in India relative to like the American military-industrial complex here. But certainly, I think that is a contributing part. You know, the Indian military, the defense contractors, and all the folks that manufacture their military equipment, they're going to be eating good right now because of what the Indian government is doing and how like Modi is very eager to sort of keep the situation escalating and keep the conflict going. I almost hit that. And but this does actually pose like I could see people asking, you know, what about Pakistan? You said they're a military junta earlier, and they are. I think the reason that Pakistan might not be as eager to jump into this kind of war is because they're also a lot less stable than India, a lot less well developed, a lot more corrupt, and basically like if war happened to Pakistan, it would be destabilizing enough and like devastating enough to so as to not even benefit the people that normally benefit from warfare, if that makes sense. And those are, I think, the material incentives that sort of create these kind of relationships that sort of you know, incentivize countries to make war or not make war. Armstrong is real but doesn't have powers. Yeah, true. Senator Armstrong is actually real. He's not a person though. He's an institution. Okay, I figured out how to do that. When you think Senator Armstrong, think of like... Actually, no. Senator Armstrong is more unhinged than the military-industrial complex. Because the military-industrial complex is war as a business. Senator Armstrong was like, no, I'm using war as a business to get rid of war as a business because I'm in it for the fucking love of the game, right? Like, Senator Armstrong is truly playing for the love of the game, you know? He's just fighting because he fucking loves a good war. Like, he's into that shit, you know? Military-industrial complex is like one step down from Senator Armstrong. They're in it for the business. God damn it, I can see the video title already. India and Pakistan did what? And it's like Armada's face in the thumbnail. TV shows are like wars are bad, but you have to accept them as a day-to-day thing. Yeah, it's interesting that like there's a sort of guys, war is evil attitude that is very safe for the military-industrial complex that gets perpetuated in popular media very frequently. Like in Saving Private Ryan, probably the most famous war movie since fucking All's Quiet on the Western Front. You know, it's like, oh yeah, war is really bad because people like who've done nothing wrong to anybody will just go overseas or go to some war theater to get blown to bits, right? But then there's constantly like this air of, but we venerate the honorable warrior or whatever, you know, we support the troops, but we hate the war, grr, you know, not realizing that the two of those are kind of inextricably linked. Don't stop wars that normally happen everywhere. Yeah, it's the normalization of war as a concept is you know, it's important to understand that wars have happened very frequently for a very long time, but like I feel like the way that they're portrayed in shows and movies sort of belittles the importance of the incentives for countries to go to war, right? Like a lot of times, to the extent that that's even discussed, it's kind of left at the level of like, oh yeah, I don't know, some border dispute or whatever, or like this country doesn't like this other country, when there's a lot more sinister shit behind it. It's almost like they're through not really explaining the motives for war, they're almost sanitizing it. You know, they're sort of manufacturing the consent that you can't do anything to stop them. If they discuss the detailed, like extremely horrific, and like misanthropic reasons that people decide to gin up support for war, then you give people the tools to potentially stop that from happening. And I feel like there's not really a willingness to do that in the, you know, the world of like for-profit media production. I don't know. I could be waffling, but you know, there's something to that, you know. Star Wars Clone Wars show did not have this problem. That is true. Star Wars The Clone Wars did not have that problem. Because it's set in the Star Wars world. And the whole reason that the Clone War breaks out is because, like, oh yeah, the Republic is fucking fat and corrupt, and the Separatists are even worse because they're just space capitalists, and they decided to separate. And now there's two factions of capitalists, basically, fighting for who will have control over galactic trade routes. That's the setting of the Star Wars prequels, you know? And then, you know, the whole Clone Wars is like, oh yeah, by the way, we're following these, like, child slave soldiers. These are, like, the main characters. And it's like, wow, okay, everything in this story is fucked up. And similarly, in the real world, there are very crass material incentives that lead countries to be like, we want to go to war here. Whether it's Ukraine having a lot of Chernozyme and strategic positioning and resources and Black Sea access that Russia is kind of going, you know, for that. Or the Palestinians existing and Israel kind of wanting that land for just expansionist purposes and like kind of like an old antiquated like colonial model of economic expansion there, motivating their jingoistic attitudes. Or you know, the sort of geopolitical jockeying that's happening between India and Pakistan. Because again, it's all about like the political control either over resources directly or the relationships that sort of determine who gets the access and priority to those resources. And Clone Wars at the end didn't have a we won, it was all worth it. Yeah, it was like, damn, that was all for fucking nothing. Yeah, there wasn't really like something that was really nice about the Clone Wars was that there was never a point where they're like, yeah, like at some level the war was justified, like, well, at least we got something out of it. It's like, no, well, like, you have each other, but like everything's just shit. It just sucks. You know? There's not, like, even in Saving Private Ryan, there's like the whole myth of the heroic US military and them, like, well, actually saving Private Ryan, you know, roll the credits. They accomplished their mission, and they're like, well, you know what? At least we did this, right? In the Clone Wars, there's no, like, at least. They just fucking die. Spoilers, if you haven't seen the Clone Wars, the last season came out in 2014, but it's like, Order 66 happens, all the clones that you've been following for several seasons get instantly brainwashed, they all attack, you know, the Jedi, and like, Ahsoka barely escapes with her life, and Rex goes with her, and like all of their friends, the other clones, fucking die in a crash. And it's like fucking everybody loses except for, you know, Palpatine and the space capitalists. I mean, some of the space capitalists also lose, because if you watch Revenge of the Sith, Anakin fucking kills them. But, you know. War is just a very convenient meat grinder administered by sociopaths who operate as part of sociopathic institutions that are concerned with their own status and access to capital. The war is not meant to be won. It is meant to be fought continuously. Of all fucking people, Eisenhower agreed with this. You know, that the military is where resources are spent. It's where surpluses go to be spent on basically nothing so that they don't get used for something better. And kill people they don't... Fascists tend to kill people they don't need anymore after you serve their uses. Yeah. Like I said, it's a sociopathic... It's a fucking convenient meat grinder for sociopaths who are part of extremely sociopathic institutions that are only concerned with their own status and access to capital. Essentially, war is what schizo neocons do for fun. But yeah, thus concludes my analysis of India and Pakistan, complete with some discussion of like Star Wars, the Clone Wars and shit. Great, cool. Wait a second, actually not yet. 12 minutes ago, Pakistan says it authorized its military to respond to Indian attack. Uh-oh. Pakistan's National Security Committee calls India's assault a heinous and shameful crime. Sure, you know, I guess that's their prerogative, right? And I mean, they did commit several, some war crimes in their strikes. I think they bombed some schools and mosques, which is against international law, but, you know, who cares about that, I guess. What else do they got here? In consonance with Article 51 of the UN Charter, Pakistan reserves the right to respond in self-defense at a time, place, and manner of its choosing to avenge the loss of innocent Pakistani lives and blatant violation of its sovereignty, the committee said in a statement. Okay. The armed forces of Pakistan have been duly authorized to undertake corresponding actions in this regard. Okay, so it seems like they're like, all right, mobilize the army. Shit. All right. I wonder here. Okay, here's something. I wonder if Pakistan is like playing that angle that I mentioned earlier, where India is very clearly. Like, they're acting more aggressively, it looks like. They're using more aggressive language. Pakistan is clearly positioning itself as being comparatively more reasonable, right? Obviously, they're both nation-states that fucking hate each other and have their own interests. But I wonder if Pakistan is trying to lean into, like, hey, international community, we're trying to do things by your playbook. We're trying to follow the rules here. And, you know, it's India that's going off the rails. And I wonder if the international community is going to kind of respond to that in kind, basically be like, yeah, okay, it does seem like Pakistan, you know, you're a state sponsor of terror and shit, but so is India, you know, so are a lot of countries. But you're not, like, going schizo mode and bombing a bunch of temples. They might do that in the future, but right now it seems like they're playing a different angle. Some people look at this like, this is why we should be isolationists. And it's hard to blame people for that, right? Because a lot of people conceive of the concept of isolationism purely in the context of military adventurism. But it's actually really important to be anti-isolationist. It's really important to be a globalist shill. Just for the reason that being connected to the international community, not being isolated, can actually go a long way to prevent wars like this from breaking out. You know, the more countries are tied to each other on an economic level, the more barriers there are to them attacking each other militarily, because that could come back to bite them economically and hurt their own material interests. You know, it's like international trade is extremely flawed in a global capitalist system, but there are some parts of it that work really well to prevent countries from attacking each other, right? So I understand the sentiment, and sure, certainly in the pedestrian sense of being anti-isolationist, meaning you're anti-military interventionism. Yes, I agree. I don't like military intervention and adventurism. That's some schizo neocon shit. We should keep our relationships to, like, you know, nice peace treaties and fucking trade agreements and, like, free flow of people and goods and services across borders, because that's good, I think, and, like, you know, helps people live freely, right? You know, like, take, for example, the European Union. Again, flawed trade agreement, but it enables countries in Europe to much more easily negotiate projects of interstate transit and, you know, working relationships between workers from one country to another. And it enables regulations to be passed more easily at a larger level so that they can regulate business in the whole of Europe as opposed to just country by country, right? That is an example of anti-isolationism, of globalism being a globalist shill. But it has pretty good benefits for most of the member countries, right? Like, it's safe to say, I think, that relationships and partnerships like the European Union can make the world better, at least for the countries that are part of those groups. You know? Yeah, and meanwhile, isolationism can very easily, you know, be a path to the dark side. It by not having these connections to other countries, it's like eliminates those barriers to military adventurism. They're like you not having very many economic connections with your neighboring countries, or even with, you know, any country in the world, makes it a lot easier for, let's say, like your military institutions or your defense contractors to justify going to war with somebody. Because, like, hey, that might hurt them, but it sure as shit doesn't hurt me. You know, who cares? Right? But yeah, you know, countries invading other countries is bad. Yeah, and then people have the irrational reaction. It's like, clearly this means we're not isolationist enough. We need to, instead of just isolating our country, we need to isolate the race from other races, right? There's a very easy, like, reactionary pipeline from blanket isolationism to extreme xenophobia and like anti-immigrant sentiment, and in fact anti-Jewish sentiment. The Germans, the Nazis in Germany in the 1930s used this rhetorical pipeline where they sort of wanted to do German economic revanchism, and they used that as a rhetorical lever to push the envelope of anti-Semitism, because the narrative was, oh, Germany has been cheated by the international Jewry. You know? I don't know if autocorrect murdered that sentence. I think I took your meaning pretty well. That is the danger of isolationism as like a principle, right? But if you're just principally anti-adventurism, anti-military adventurism, then that's great. That's good, actually. But it's important that, like, you kind of have to be anti-isolationist in order to properly be anti-military adventurist. You know? Like, if you want countries not to go to war, you should be making arguments for them. You should be, like, supporting them being connected to each other in as many ways as possible, so that, like, they will be risking a shit ton of stuff if they ever decided to go to war, you know? And it seems like India unintentionally is sort of severing those connections. That's part of why I said that, like, this war has the potential to in some ways backfire on India, because, like, they have, like, India being a country that's, like, connected in the international setting to a pretty good extent. They are risking these connections that they have. They are potentially severing these connections that they have to other nations in pursuing this project of war making. Whereas Pakistan, it seems like, is trying to cultivate these connections by saying, like, hey, India is unstable enough to sort of forsake what connections it has, and we don't want to do that, so we're going to, like, say, hey, we don't really want to respond, but we will in a very measured and internationally sanctioned sense. In fact, to reach, like, I don't think I really need to do this because Indian Hitlerites are, Indian Hitlerites, but to reach an olive branch to people who are like, so then what should India do? Not go to war? There's quite a few of those people, right? Here's what India could do. If India wanted to, I don't know, assert some degree of control over Kashmir or sort of win this geopolitical game that it's playing with Pakistan, you have to know how to play it, right? If you are the state of India, how do you assert your geopolitical control in this region that doesn't lead to war? It's going to sound counterintuitive, but number one, normalize relations with Pakistan. Take the initiative by normalizing relations with Pakistan, which would then potentially enable you in the future to open up negotiations about the division and the plebiscite, the aforementioned plebiscite of the Kashmir territories, to basically settle, okay, these lines are very complicated. We're going to have a delegation from India, from Kashmir, from Pakistan, from China to talk about who's going to get this land, and potentially all of us should be willing to sacrifice something in the process, right? By sacrificing what potential meager land gains you might have made, as any country really that's spearheading these negotiations, you come out looking like a really reasonable and measured geopolitical partner that can be trusted with influence and connections in your region. And that is how you come out on top in that situation. You don't need to fire a single shot to do any of that. But at the end of the day, if India, like, wants to be the top dog, the key to that is not to drumbeat and, like, beat your chest and, go guerrilla mode with Pakistan. Both of you stop fucking going guerrilla mode, right? The key to that is to basically have a race to the negotiating table. You need to win that race to the negotiating table. Say, look, this territory has been disputed for a long time. Let's be the more reasonable nation here and say, look, we'll divide it up. We can divide it up this way. We can have discussions about that, right? Yeah, this is why America was on top for so long. We, as many, military adventures as we got into, those actually hurt our international standing. The war in Iraq, the war in Afghanistan, the war in fucking Syria, to the extent that we were involved there. And all the mishaps that we got into, our adventurism in sub-Saharan Africa, these all put a dent in America's international reputation. Our international reputation was held up by us going to the negotiating table for so many other countries, going to the negotiating table for disputed territories, going to the negotiating table for trade deals, negotiating our own trade deals, cultivating these long-standing partnerships, right? That gave America basically so many points, world politics points, that we had to spend on shit. I know I'm talking about this in, like, video game terms, but that is kind of how this operates, is that, like, it's there's a lot of I scratch your back, you scratch mine in politics, right? And America was really willing to be like, hey, I'll scratch your back, you just, I'll just ask you to scratch mine later. And a lot of countries were like, yeah, okay, sure. Was watching the end of Squid Game season 1. Good show. And if India, to bring it back, if India or Pakistan wants to, like, assert control over the region, they kind of have to play that same game, But, the military-industrial complex doesn't really like when countries play that game. All of the military adventurism that America got into that was, like, detrimental to our international reputation was at the behest of the military-industrial complex. They wanted that. Why? Because the war isn't meant to be won. Like, the military-industrial complex survives and thrives with or without the relationships that America has. In fact, the less conflict that happens, the more stable things are, the less happy the military-industrial complex is. Because they don't, like, they don't have anyone to fight anymore. That's why the war in Iraq happened. That's why the war in Afghanistan happened. That's why we went into all these places in like sub-Saharan Africa and stuff like that. Is because the military-industrial complex wanted a place to test their boys and their toys. So, modded version of the video game you're talking about with My Little Pony characters? Yeah, the fucking strategy game community goes fucking insane with it sometimes. I'll just use this here. Reminds me of that line in Metal Gear Solid Revengeance, or Metal Gear Rising Revengeance, the world is getting a bit too peaceful. Yeah, that's exactly like the sort of relationship that occurs. That's like the tension that happens between like neoliberal administrators and bureaucrats, people who are sort of passive upholders of the like rules-based order or whatever, and then the military-industrial complex, you know, which are like, you know what, the world's too peaceful, we need a good fight so that money can keep flowing our way, you know? I'm gonna chuck these red shells, I think. Chuck this one. Sweet. World peace bullshit. Launches coming at some poor Middle Eastern country? Yeah, basically. Average American military moment. Hell, wasn't being at war with Pakistan even a fucking plot point in Metal Gear? God damn it. See, this is what happens when leftists make video games, is that they're just fucking bangers forever. But yeah. India's being Hitlerite. They shouldn't have gone to war, even if they, you know, were like, talking from the perspective, like, well, how does India, like, get ahead in this situation? Don't go to war, idiot. That's not how you do that. In fact, that hurts you, long term. Because it also hurt America. And I think, funnily enough, India, by attacking Pakistan in the way that it did, has sort of provided the room for Pakistan to play this game now. You know anything about Indian politics? You know the bad guys here? Yeah, like, relatively speaking, right? India and Pakistan are both nation states that fucking hate each other and, like, sponsor terror groups in Kashmir. But, like, yeah, India, like, obviously was more insane for airstriking Pakistan proper, for launching missiles into Pakistan. And Pakistan has even been, like, trying to emphasize that in all of their statements by saying, like, look, compliant with international law, we're going to do X, Y, and Z, right? We're going to do this as outlined in this article in the UN Charter. And they're, like, being very careful not to step on the toes of any countries that could potentially become sympathetic to them later. Because India's just going full schizo mode, you know? And I think there's also the matter that, like, this conflict won't necessarily be completely internally destabilizing for India, but it very well could be for Pakistan. You know, like, Pakistan is way less stable than India. So it's like, India's interests aren't very well served by them attacking Pakistan right now, but they at least won't collapse for doing so. Pakistan actually is, like, in a very precarious spot for stuff like this. Yeah, I know. I gotcha. Kill your revenge, kill all the bad guys, you still kind of lose. Yeah, because it's not about, like, you know, the point of Metal Gear Rising Revengeance is that it's not about that. The good guys versus bad guys narrative doesn't work when when, like, the reason that wars break out, the reason that these fucking terrible things keep happening is because of institutions that have their own interests, because of classes of people that have their own interests that lead to these things continuing to happen. Like, there are much broader causes than just, like, there are some bad guys doing this, right? In fact, that's highlighted throughout Metal Gear, is that, like, the Patriots and the Sons of the Patriots or whatever are only able to do any of this because of how much they are just... They're not even, like, the group that calls themselves to that. They're just this faceless institution of like, people that have, like, overlapping motives in all the right areas. It's literally a point where they say, if you stop me, someone will replace me. Yeah. Because it's not the person, it's not like the person. We frequently attribute things to, like, I don't know, Trump did this, the president did this, the prime minister did this. You know, we know the names Trump and Modi and Hitler and fucking, you know, Keir Starmer. Like, the leaders of these nations, we know their names, right? But they're just a face, you know? If you, for example, if you took out Narendra Modi, somebody else from the BJP would come up, and they'd be basically the same. If you took out Keir Starmer, somebody from the Labour Party would come up and be basically the same. If you took out Donald Trump, somebody from the Republican Party would come up and be basically the same. There might be some differences between their styles, right? But they would have fundamentally some of the same political objectives because they're part of the same political groups that are controlled by the same institutions, socioeconomic and socio-political institutions. Another bad thing about superhero media? Oh, yeah. Superhero media bites down hard on the debate, or I guess the anarcho-capitalism pill or whatever the fuck, you know, libertarian bullshit. That broader institutions aren't like a thing that exists. Cut one head off, two more grow in its place. Yeah. Institutions just do whatever they need to sustain themselves. And the military-industrial complex is one of the most unhinged and dangerous institutions because of what it needs to sustain itself, which is a perpetual state of war, a perpetual venue, of, like, basically a perpetual meat grinder to spend surplus of people and, like, material capital. Imagine the Hydra head being born in the middle of a fight. Oh, that poor fucking baby Hydra. It gets cut off instantly. Like, two more heads grow back. It gets cut off again. They grow back. And then it's got, like, so many heads, it, like, can barely keep itself up. Or whatever. Poor bastard. You know, when you think about it, life as a Hydra would probably kind of suck. You know? Because, like, from all the media where Hydras are depicted, it's like... It's not like the head that grows back. The two heads that grow back are like half the size or whatever, or like proportional to what it can hold up. No, it's just the same size head, but now there's two of them, right? Eventually, you're going to grow so many heads back that it's over bloated and will like fall over under its own weight, which is kind of apt given how that's kind of how institutions work too. At a certain point, there is actually a point where institutions become so over bloated that they begin to crumble under their own weight and bureaucracy, right? Which is why, you know, societal change, revolution, reform are such like constant imperatives. Maybe the fucking ancient Greeks or whoever the fuck wrote the Hydra myth, you know, whoever was writing that shit in like linear B before the Phoenicians fucking invented A, B, C, D, E, F, G. You know, maybe they were cooking. Oh, another update. 10 minutes ago. Trump offers to help end India-Pakistan crisis. U.S. President Donald Trump says he wants to see an end to the escalation between India and Pakistan. I want to see it stop. If I can do anything to help, I will be there, he told reporters in the Oval Office. We want to see them work it out. My Trump impression, again, not great today because, you know, I had to just bust it out at a moment's notice. We want to see them work it out. They're great countries, India and Pakistan. I met with Prime Minister Modi, Narendra Modi. That's his name. He was a great guy. Great guy. I liked him. We had a good time. Have a good relationship with India. But, you know, we think they should stop fighting. They should really stop that. We don't want that. It's terrible for their country. There we go. That's probably a little bit better. So that update had surprisingly little to it. I don't know what that really means. You know, U.S. You know, with its non-specific signaling kind of being on the side of I hope both teams have fun, smiley face, or something like that. Which I think is a classic Bill Clinton moment, personally. But, you know, we get it from Trump this time. Keep playing kids moment? Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, that's really it from Trump. So it seems like America, I don't know if America is even going to weigh in here. Donald Trump is loves to make deals. Making deals, one of my favorite things. Art of the deal. I love it. I love doing it in real life. That's why I got into politics. So I make all the best deals, great deals, tremendous deals. And, you know, folks, it looks like there's a deal to be made between India and Pakistan. So why don't I go over there and help them make a deal? It'll be a great deal. Deal of the century, even. And they won't be fighting anymore. It'll be such a good deal that they're going to stop fighting. I make so many deals, you'll get bored of me making deals. It'll be that good. I wonder if Trump is even in his own head anymore, considering how old he is. I don't know. He just fucking says shit, dude. He's like an old man just kind of floating through the ending years of his life, I think. So, you know, he's definitely not all there. Like, if we're using a turn of phrase, you know. Yeah, I don't know. If his meetings with Prime Minister Modi in the past have been much indication, I would assume that America might lean more into being on India's side, which means we could have a potential like problematic situation brewing in terms of diplomacy as well, because I know that China has been leaning a little bit more towards being sympathetic to Pakistan. You know. Like, I don't know how that would turn out. Or I wonder if, like, the military-industrial complex is kind of, like, directing him to be like, no, just let him fight, you know? You know, I do wonder. Oh. So if what I'm seeing here is indicative of anything, it seems like my earlier prediction was right that this could mean war, but I don't think it's not gonna mean World War III. It's not going to mean, at least not immediately, mean like a broader war, and it's definitely not gonna mean nuclear war. Both countries have kind of ruled that out already. Watch me blue shell myself, or maybe not. Okay. That much is good. Pakistan says Indian attack endangered civilian aviation. Our Emirates, Gulf Air, Chinese and Korean flights. Okay, yeah. Yeah, well, here's Pakistan trying to cultivate the support of the international community more as well. Pakistan says Indian attack endangered civilian aviation. Pakistani military spokesperson Ahmed Sharif Chaudhry says 57 flights were in the air during the Indian assault. Yeah, that does seem pretty dangerous. There were multiple flights with thousands of passengers whose lives were put in grave danger. Chaudhry was quoted as saying by Dawn newspaper. These were not just Pakistani flights, but there were Saudi flights, Qatari, Emirates, Etihad, Gulf Air, Chinese, and Korean flights. Basically, name dropping all the countries that they're trying to like. Well, I mean, I don't doubt that these planes were in the air. I mean, there's a lot of passenger flights that go around, but like certainly name dropping countries that it would be very beneficial to Pakistan if they received their support. Qatar, the Emirates, Saudi Arabia. These are petrostates. And then obviously like China and Korea are very strategically positioned economically. Yeah, I think that kind of goes to support what I was saying earlier, that this is going to be like India trying to basically missile strike Pakistan as hard as they can, and then Pakistan, responding with their military, but then like basically trying to say, look, international community, we're going to do all this by the book. Look how insane India is being, right? Imagine if they accidentally blew up a Chinese flight. Now they have to deal with that. That would be something. Certainly if India is as insane as Israel, if India behaves as insane as Israel has in the Gaza Strip, it's not out of the question that they could seriously endanger or even strike down out of recklessness or like disregard or something, some sort of international like airplane or something like that as well. It seems more likely to me that India really runs afoul of the international community by kind of like being more wanton with its missile strikes and striking civilian targets. And that's not to say that Pakistan hasn't killed civilians either. I think their missile strikes last night killed civilians. As far as I remember. I'm just trying to analyze this from a perspective of like which country is going to be employing what kind of a strategy in wartime, right? And I guess India does have the military force potentially to like overwhelm Pakistan, right? But like yeah, it's man, I feel like I constantly have to make all of this clear over and over again, because people very frequently hear me saying like, yeah, India's being insane and obviously they're bad and I don't support them. And they would say like, oh, so you support Pakistan? No, not really. What I'm saying is that India shouldn't have like missile strike Pakistan. That doesn't mean I like Pakistan. It'd be like if the United States missile strike North Korea. I don't like the US would be the bad guy in that situation, but that doesn't mean I like North Korea, And that doesn't mean that like I think that North Korea is the good guy or whatever, Vegeta mindlessly throwing ki blast energy. Yeah, that's true. Vegeta's fucking ki blasting small children, and then Pakistan is like, international community, India is constantly throwing ki blasts at our children. They are using ki blasts on the schools. Please do something. And then the international community is like, damn, dog. Maybe we'll do something one day. I don't know. It's the UN. They probably won't do anything. And India's like, I fucking hate Pakistan. I fucking hate Pakistan. I fucking hate Pakistan. And they're like throwing the ki blasts at schools and mosques. And of course, they're also, like, to be clear, India's also targeting terror cells, what they know to be terror cells. They're just also being so reckless that they don't really care if they hit civilian infrastructure too. In an alternate universe, you could show this to someone, they would think it's your fan fiction. Probably. Bowser's Castle. Should we know that India would happily target its own Muslim citizens? Oh yeah, for sure. That's part of like what leads India to target civilians and stuff like that. In addition to all the more non-specific military-industrial complex, like or I'd say non-specific. In addition to the military-industrial like complex motivations to just keep the war machine churning, there is also, like, the nationalism in India is so virulently anti-Muslim that a lot of this, like, this hatred for Pakistan, in large part, is because it is it is a Muslim nation, you know? And yeah, there have been a lot of problems with the hate crimes and stochastic violence against Muslims in India as well. So there's a consistent anti-Muslim through line for India and for the BJP especially, Modi and his ruling party. That's kind of like their whole platform. The axis of their far-right populism is fucking hating Muslims. Wouldn't surprise me if assuming a wider conflict with Pakistan occurred, they would use that as an excuse to start committing atrocities with their own, against their own Muslim citizens. That's possible. That is possible. I think it depends on, like, it kind of depends on whether or not this broader conflict is enough to, on its own, gin up enough support for Modi to stay in power, right? And I think this will be my last, that will be my last race. I'll quit out and check Al Jazeera and then might end stream. What I could see happening if this becomes a broader conflict is that, like, Modi and his government, they start doing some sort of martial law adjacent stuff at home. There's definitely going to be more political repression against Muslims in India. There's no question in my mind about that. As a result of any potential escalation in this conflict. But I think things would have to get a bit more desperate for them to start, like, deputizing citizens to kill Muslims and to go full, like, massacre pogrom mode. But yeah, if Modi's popularity continues to decay, if it becomes clear at a certain point that him, like, airstriking Pakistan isn't enough for people to keep supporting him in India, they would probably very easily go to that stage of things. Because, if you're familiar with the steps of committing a genocide, a lot of the dehumanization and vitriolic rhetoric is kind of already in place. You wouldn't need to do a whole lot to justify further violence against Muslims in India from a political perspective, So that's potentially very dangerous. Yeah. And they would definitely use that as an excuse. The United States used the war in Japan as an excuse to put Japanese Americans in internment camps. And that wasn't even, as far as I know, there wasn't that much pre-existing racial animus against Japanese Americans before the bombing of Pearl Harbor. I could be misremembering. I know there was a lot of racial animus against Chinese people. And because Americans are racist and they're like, yeah, all Asian people look the same. Obviously, that would bleed over to Japanese people. But I don't think there was, like, a uniquely vitriolic space that they occupied. No, that's all my water. Let's check back with Al Jazeera one more time. And then it seems like there haven't been any updates. This is still developing, obviously. So that there's more to come, but I'm not going to be there to cover it. I think not for a little while. We'll see. We'll see how this goes. It's possible it becomes another forever war. I don't know. Look, I think the most likely scenario in my mind is that this conflict doesn't necessarily go beyond the borders of India and Pakistan, from the sense of, like, I don't think other countries are going to get militarily involved. It's kind of not how warfare operates anymore, because even if the trade barriers are insufficient for two countries to go to war against each other, it's usually enough to prevent other countries from getting involved in a wider sense. I think Pakistan's probably going to try to retreat into diplomacy where possible to make itself look more reasonable, to try to basically keep playing the geopolitical jockeying game while India is doing missile strikes and marching troops in, potentially. To my knowledge, they haven't started doing that yet. And this is just another example of fascism and the military-industrial complex fucking wringing their hands, being like, yes, you know, being the sickos looking in through the window. Fuck yeah, war. You know, the military-industrial complex is like, fuck yeah, good war, because it means they get more money and they get to spend surplus capital to keep themselves in the you know, position of power that they're already in. And then the fascists are like, fuck yeah, good war, because it means an excuse for them to kill minorities that they hate. In this case, Muslims. Who else is live? Cody Schwab. Thanks for watching, and support the channel if you would be so kind.